This is Covered Calls with Kevin Simpson, featuring expert insights and analysis from the industry's top investment professionals. If you'd like a deeper understanding of today's markets, this is the show for you.
Thank you for tuning in to Covered Calls with Kevin Simpson. Today we have a very, very special guest, Mr. Tim Seymour, who I think is the coolest guy on CNBC.
Oh, gosh.
At least for the days, once a month when I'm not on there. Tim and I both manage portfolios for Amplify, but he is also the chief investment officer of Seymour Asset Management. He's the portfolio manager for Amplify's Seymour Cannabis ETF, symbol CNBS, not to be confused with CNBC. But most of you know him as being a regular on Fast Money and one of my favorite people on the network. So, Tim, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes today to join the podcast.
Overly warm. It's great to be here, Kevin. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and this is the place to be. I hear in the podcast world and in the video podcast world of Wall Street Talking Heads. So it's fine. Thank God I was finally chosen to be here. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, we go down the list. But here's the thing. Our viewers, Tim, are financial advisors. So where you get so many viewers of a cross section, I mean, we have a very defined audience. We service financial advisors, both of us all around the country. And for whatever reason, they choose to tune in and kind of get some behind the scenes stuff. So we try to keep it as informal as possible, as fun as possible. And before we get into your background, which is incredible when you look at where you've lived, who you've managed money for, all the really fascinating things about your professional career, I can't help but watching you every day next to that Led Zeppelin poster. And we had Anthony Scaramucci was on last month, and he recommended this book by Bob Spitz. It's a Led Zeppelin book.
Yeah,
he's such an amazing writer, and I had really not been introduced to all the stories behind the scenes. And as I read that book, I couldn't put it down, and just wanted to get your thoughts on Led Zeppelin.
Well, first of all, I mean, I love Anthony. We're old friends. Bravo for Anthony for referencing Zeppelin. I mean, I didn't know he had it in him. So, there's a big notch in his belt. The Zeppelin poster in a world where I remember. So when we first went to remote studios with CNBC, I had a Rolling Stones Some Girls poster. So I've been collecting rock posters my whole life, and every rock show I go to, and certainly in the last 25 years, I've left with a rock poster. My wife and I are huge rock and roll fans. She's a music lawyer, and we this is our life. And so I have rock posters all over my house, and I have a pretty strong collection. But when I set up the home studio, I had a Stones Some Girls poster, and it was hanging kind of in a similar spot. And at some point, a couple of weeks in, I get a call from the legal compliance, whatever team at CNBC that oversees the complaints that they get from somebody somewhere. And I don't know if this was network sponsors. I don't know what this was, but they had a problem with the exposed midriff of the cartoon character wearing the Andy Warhol kind of like look back thing. And so my Some Girls poster was taken out, and I had to replace it. And I brought in Zeppelin, who should be batting cleanup anyway, typically. And by the way, Zeppelin hit it out of the house. I'd never gotten more feedback than when I put the Zeppelin poster in. People liked the backdrop before, but now the Zeppelin poster is synonymous with me being on air. And thank God for it.
Well, I know you're a drummer. How's your how are your sticks compared to Bonzo?
My Bonham's, look, Bonham is one of these guys that is like all of the great drummers, and he's probably in the top 5. I prefer not to rank them. If gun to the head, I'm a Keith Moon guy, but there's nobody probably that's more spectacular than Neil Peart, the late Neil Peart of Rush. But Bonham's right there, and I think Bonham is kind of like Ringo in that I think he's overshadowed by other members of his band. But in fact, the game that Guy Adami and I play on our commercial break show is, pick a band and rank the talent of the underlying members of the band from 1 to 4 or 5 or 6 or 19 if it's Earth, Wind, and Fire. And Zeppelin. Bonham might come in second relative to his mates, but I think anyway. So love John Bonham. Can only could dare ever to walk in his shoes or in his drumsticks.
What a life he led. I was curious because noticing the pictures and then kind of with respect to home studios, this one excluded, it seemed like a lot of people were competing for different pictures. So I was thinking of Bob Pisani,
Yeah.
who had a rotating, just an awesome display of background. I don't know how many people picked up on it, but it was almost like every day we were looking forward to see what Dead poster he'd have.
I run into Bob at more music shows in New York City. I've run into him at the Beacon Theater, which for your audience is one of the iconic rock and roll venues in the world. It just happens to be 2 blocks from my house, so there's no excuse not to get there. And I see Bob. Bob's an old friend, an incredible on-air talent at CNBC in terms of what he's done for markets over the years. And he's got great taste in music. If I'm Bob, I would tone down the acid trips on his pictures a little bit, because for some people it's overly aggressive. No, but I love his posters. They're fantastic.
He's a really smart guy. We did an article together the other day, and he was making some references that I was like, most people wouldn't get these. I didn't realize you were that deep, but a pretty smart dude.
Bob is very smart. He's also 114 years old, and nobody knows that. So he's got more music, but more importantly, market knowledge in that brain. He's one of the best.
I'll tell you a funny story. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago that I took my son to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. He had never been there, and someone introduced us to Bob, and he was as gracious as anyone could be. He gave us a tremendous tour. He was super nice to my son, which is always something that scores a lot of points with me. He took us up to his office, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be great. Well, the poor guy had a server room with a little chair and maybe like a snack tray, if you remember what those were from your grandmom's house with a computer on it. So you realize how precious the space is within the New York Stock Exchange, but at least he had an office.
That's one more office than some much bigger hitters in the world. But again, Bob's place is, and let's be clear, the music world, and if there was ever music TV outside of MTV, it's a lot more glamorous than the world of business TV. We deserve better digs, but there's no green M&Ms on the floor in the green room of the New York Stock Exchange.
When I first saw some of the sets in that upstairs kind of like work area, where I again, just being so shocked and realizing that space is tremendous value there. But it was funny, they had like 40 people crammed up in this little thing, maybe the size of my spare bathroom or something. So now I guess the exchange being more of a set in the museum than a workspace, we can all lobby for more space when you go back onto set.
Yeah, it is incredible. Again, the history at the New York Stock Exchange. My first couple trips down there when I got into the business were mind-blowing, and a natural high beyond what you could get at a Dead show. And I think it's not an insult to say that they're now TV sets. I mean, why wouldn't you have the backdrop of the most historic places in the world? The fact of the matter is, technology's changed the way we all do our jobs. It's technology also is, for the audience here and for the advisor community, thank God for the developments of technology. It means that guys are sitting with more access to information and data and analytics than they've ever had, and the bar's been raised, and frankly, it's been great for investors too. So what's not seemingly great for the must-have dynamic of the floor of the New York Stock Exchange is actually great for everybody, including advisors everywhere. So it's a good thing.
Well, it untethers us. I mean, I know when I first got into the business, we had one Quotron for like 8 guys, and you couldn't leave the office during market hours, and sometimes even trying to get a fresh quote if you weren't at the Quotron, you'd call a desk or try to figure something out to get prices. It was a much different world. And even to the extent that we had a ticker tape in the office, and this was in Philadelphia, so we weren't in New York, but the guys, old timers, would come in with their notes and their hats and their hat stand, and they'd just sit there and watch the tape all day. And once in a while they'd place an order. It was just a really, really fun world. Anyone that wants to get insight into it, you can, was the Eddie Murphy movie with
Trading Places?
Trading Places, yeah. There's a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, but from the days of Duke and Duke and the crop reports being due, again, for the retail investor, the high net worth, the self-directed investor, like, I realize Wall Street's vilified, but guess who holds the cards right now? I mean, it's not Wall Street, and I know in the world of Robinhood and in the world of the democratization of markets, and there's always, look, GameStop, Reddit, dynamics in the last 12 to 18 months are powerful, but look, the Wall Street club's been broken in terms of price disclosure and transparency, and then efficiencies of markets, and it all adds up to a better world for the retail investor. It means, first of all, price discovery is available to everybody. And if you think about the money that was being made by Wall Street 30 and 40 and God forbid 50 years ago, I mean, truly, there was no price discovery. And I wouldn't say it wasn't a rigged game, but it was certainly a case where, look, if you don't know the price of where things trade, you can be charged almost anything. And I just think that this is what's sometimes lost. Yes, I do think that there are institutional and insiders and fast money and people that seem to have an edge that push it to all extents. That's the nature of kind of how Wall Street's always worked. But I actually think that as a guy that's worked on Wall Street, and I can tell you one thing. I want all guys who are manipulating markets and prices to go to jail as much as you do. And anybody whose returns are too good are probably too good. And so I just think that, again, the world we live in, both as fund managers and for the investor community, but the advisor community, which again is serving the investor community better than ever. I just think that technology is a great thing.
Yeah, and it's also given the financial advisors and all of us that ability to have some remote work.
Well, the disaster recovery plan used to be 20 pages of my first hedge fund, and it doesn't need to be 20 pages in a world of servers and the internet, and so basically records are stored and compiled and kept. It's not that complicated, as a commercial says out there, and it's also a case where plugging in a computer and even a phone into the same computer jack, and a cell phone, and it's simple. I mean, honestly, we could be doing it from the beach with also though the security of encryption and segregation of files and money, and so thank God for that, because we were all tested in ways that the most difficult part of that in terms of doing business was really just updating ADV files and letting people know where you were, because you weren't in your office, and you suddenly realized that you didn't have to apologize for that.
We had a hurricane here in Naples where our office was shut down for a week without power. I mean, literally, we had chains on the doors so no one could get in to get the hard files, but we worked remotely without missing a beat. Now, a hurricane, you kind of know it's coming, so we were able to go to our remote locations and kind of test that disaster plan that you hope to never have to engage in, but it was seamless for
Hurricane Sandy. I remember, when was that, Kevin? I mean, Hurricane Sandy, I'm guessing, was probably now 11, 12 years ago. I'm trying to think, maybe about 10 years ago.
I would guess it's over a decade.
Because I remember our office, which used to be in Carnegie Towers, for my when I was running a long short EM hedge fund, was right there at Carnegie Towers, and we actually could get, the office was okay, but there was a crane atop of a building, which is now one of the most famous or infamous buildings in New York City, 157, which basically came down and blocked anyone from getting in the building for a couple weeks, which probably made people even more angry with this. For folks that don't know this building, if you're looking at the skyline of Manhattan right now, this building kind of looks like it's giving you the finger as you drive in from wherever you're coming in. And that's kind of how I felt at the time. But we had to work. My prime broker was UBS, and they gave us space near Grand Central. It was kind of an interesting time. You remember it being kind of fun, and we all showed up with like our raincoats on and whatnot. But we, in today's world, that never would have happened.
Well, the worst was, and it goes without saying, it's almost insulting not to mention it, but the way the stock market was resilient and able to come back from 9/11. I mean, that was there no worse incident ever that we can discuss. And I was in Philadelphia during that just horrific month, year, decade, forever. You never forget it. But also just shows the resiliency of the markets. And there was no better person. I don't care what they say about the New York Stock Exchange. Was it Grasso?
Dick Grasso. Yeah.
Just he
was a leader at a time we needed leadership, and that's in this country. We remember the people that have been there during the difficult times, and he was, where you were when in a world of I heard from my parents, it was JFK shot and things like that. In fact, with the whole new Beatles Get Back thing going on Disney Plus, which is wild, by the way. If anyone who hasn't seen this, you don't even have to be a Beatles fan to be so drawn into this. And sorry for this tangent, but we're talking rock and roll today as well. And the fact that you get 6 hours kind of just being in the studio, being one of the group, being someone that was going to get coffee or someone that was actually helping to do arrangement or sitting in the studio room and mixing stuff. You feel like you're part of something that no one's been a part of before. So I encourage you to see it, because again, the Beatles, I would have ranked Zeppelin well ahead of the Beatles. I still probably do, along with the Who and a couple other bands. But I always kind of paid homage, but incredible. So the reason I brought that up, by the way, is because I remember where I was when John Lennon was shot, and I was a freshman in high school, and it was, I knew what I didn't know about just how important that day was. But in terms of 9/11, I got off the plane in Moscow on my way to my office out there. I was working for a Russian bank, and in fact, it was the first trip I'd taken my parents out to Moscow, and I had been there for about 3 years. And I was back and forth. I lived in Moscow for a couple of years after leaving my job at UBS, where I was at a business school. And it was I had a nice, safe job on Park Avenue. And somewhere 3 years into this, I decided that there was more exciting frontiers out there. And the emerging markets world was just seemed to be beckoning. I was trading G24 debt, which most of our audience probably doesn't even know what that means. And the G24 were, the high grade countries, and the G24 debt was the sovereign debt. So I was trading spreads between not just, U.S., Germany, U.S., Canada, Japan, UK, but, Norway and Denmark and Sweden and the government bond markets. It was a great foundation in markets, by the way, but I got the itch to do emerging markets from a couple people that were sitting in the next row trading, much wilder stuff from me at UBS. And one of my mentors took a job out there. He was a great guy. He's passed, and he was somebody that was just bigger than life to me. And he was also one of these guys that, had been, went from running the treasury desk at Merrill Lynch to then being paid, enormous sum to come over to Bear Stearns to set it up, then to be given an enormous sum at UBS to set it up. And in each place you'd get blown out and you'd get a bigger contract at the next place. That never happened to me, by the way, Kevin. That happened to him. And he went to Russia. And he called me. He's like, Timmy, you've got to come and check this place out. I realize Russia's got its problems, but capital markets are being born here. And this was 7 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, but and 3 years after already the first Russian crisis. But it hadn't really happened yet. And I moved to Moscow, and this is for a much longer episode when I come back. But I enjoyed some really important years of my career. 98, 99, and part of 2000. And then I was back and forth a lot. I was set up the U.S. office for this Russian bank in New York and running a small team. And I got off the plane and I remember getting into the office, and I and so you fly all night and you kind of just get off the plane, you go to work because that's the way you did things. And everyone was gathered around these big screens on the floor, and there was a couple somewhat sarcastic remarks, about because a lot of people really didn't know what was going on over there. And it was after the first plane had hit. I don't think anyone was intending to be mean-spirited. And of course, that's one of the great kind of mixed melancholy dynamics of looking back at 9/11. I think the entire world came together. And my Russian colleagues were at first just thought it was a plane that got away and hit the World Trade Center, and then of course we all watched the second plane hit. It was devastating, right? It was devastating personally. It was devastating emotionally. It was devastating for the world, and it was amazing and beautiful how we all responded to that. And I hope the world, doesn't have to go through that again. But I do think that there was a level of camaraderie and a bond that existed not just amongst Americans, but really around the world that I thought was special.
Yeah, we probably hadn't seen that since the 40s after World War II. I'm trying to think how to say this. So my cousin sent me a letter that my grandfather had written to my grandmother. I just read it 2 days ago for the first time, and he wrote it the day that the war ended. He was in the South Pacific, and he was just talking about this, from his perspective, being on a small boat in World War II and everything else, and now the war is over, and the way the country came together after that. Also,
yeah.
To your point, hopefully we don't need another war or a terrorist attack to come together. But I think it had to have been really difficult, first of all, to be in Russia, number one, and then to be getting off of an airplane. You have that whole psychological thing to think about and kind of.
Yeah, it was crazy. By the way, nice use of "Come Together." I know we're now going to start quoting Beatles songs and also Aerosmith songs. Actually, some might argue they did it better. But what I remember most was almost like standing vigil with my parents and with some American colleagues at this place called the Starlight Diner in Moscow, which was a small chain of 50s Americana diners where you could get a hamburger and a malt chop. They were some of the most popular places in Moscow. And one of my partners out in Russia, actually American guy who started this chain. And we sat there for hours and hours and we're calling people. So it was a crazy time. I couldn't get back. For an extra week or so. And of course, got back to, look, I'm a New York City resident, and it was shocking. Shocking to see pictures up on lampposts of missing husbands and wives, and just unbelievably devastating. So difficult time.
It was, and I'm glad we touched on it because people forget. Like with anything else, time goes by and you forget, and I think it's important that we don't ever
forget. Yeah. For sure.
Well, I know we're probably running out of time, and rather than leaving on a somber note like that, if you can give me one quick story about how you came to CNBC. Everyone knows you from CNBC. We all love you and watch every day and root for you.
Well, you're kind.
Tell us how they find you, and 15 years there is a long time, so you must be doing something right.
Yeah, we just had our 15-year anniversary. We're incredibly proud of it. Fast Money is a brand now that's taken. I think it's like we're Kleenex. We're Clorox. We're Band-Aids. People know Fast Money equates to. It's the sports center for markets, and we're on after the end of the day. And by the way, great TV wisdom and production to understand that this was something that markets needed and never really had, because the reason why we all love sports, but we all love markets, because every day there's something new, and every day you can be someone that trades government bond debt, but you care a lot about what's going on in the equity market, even if it's not your core expertise. Or you don't have to be a professional athlete to want to watch, what's going on in sports or even play, anyway. So, right. So 2001 or 2 was my first time ever being on financial TV to promote, this business I was running in the US for this Russian investment bank. And I remember it well. I called a PR agency and I just said, get me on financial TV so that people know that I'm actually an American guy running a Russian investment bank in New York in 2002. And that, by the way, emerging markets and commodities and things that people really are starting to care about, they should care about, and that we're not KGB. And I'd grown up on trading floors where the standard was CNBC, and there was competition out there too that did a great job. But financial TV was just getting going. And it was credibility, I thought. So I called a PR agency, just get me on one of these shows. What are you going to talk about? Anything they want. Yeah. I don't care. I think we should probably be talking about oil. Russia's actually the world's largest producer. And I've got some views on this and some insight. There's an OPEC meeting coming up. Why don't I talk about these 3 things? And this is why it's important to their audience. And off they went, and they came back. And my first shot was on CNN FN, and CNN FN was the financial arm of CNN, and great, great network. And I did something, got on, got off, took a couple business cards with me, and said that was really fun. And I'm sure all my buddies, like, I'm not surprised you went on TV and loved that. You love to talk. You're full of it. And I was like, well, yeah. And I kind of know what I'm talking about with the stuff I know what I'm talking about. So, and I felt like I could actually deliver content that made sense. But as I started doing more and more TV, also I started doing Bloomberg TV. I started doing CNBC. And I felt like I had the routine down, which is get on, say something, have a little personality, and get off, and be ready for the next news item and news hook, and pitch it to producers who are always looking for new information. And you can be as much of an asset to them as they are to you. And I only paid that PR agency once, and then I had it down myself. And so back to Fast Money though. So I'd been doing financial TV for a few years, and my hits once a month or whatever on various networks. But CNBC was always the gold standard, and they asked me in 2006 if I wanted to try out for the show called Fast Money, which I'd heard of, and knew it was a little bit about the show, and knew that it was kind of the show where people were talking about everything in markets altogether. And I said, look, I'm flattered you'd even consider me for this. But and I know what I know, but I also know that no one wants to hear my view of Apple. No one wants to hear my view of, and at that time, I mean, what would we have been talking about? GE. But what I also knew was that, this was, look, the jury of your peers on Wall Street is the most important thing I've ever worried about. I never really worried about, it's about credibility and respect. And is Seymour, does he know what he's talking about? So I was actually really concerned that the minute I started talking about Apple or GE, that there'd be rotten tomatoes chucked at screens around Wall Street trading floors. And there probably was. But I think a lot of people didn't really at first understand what Fast Money was there to do. It's not like we're doing God's work, but we're there to talk about, we're there to be the greatest insult that they thought they could deliver to Fast Money was the greatest compliment. Yes, you're right. We are an inch deep and a mile wide. That's kind of the point. And the point is that we're people that have all managed risk, and we all know what it's like to go home with a portfolio at night. And we all have insights into how to look at balance sheets. And frankly, if you give me a computer and I can quickly look up a company's earnings and their balance sheet, I can have a view on almost anything. And if you ask my wife, I have a view on almost anything. So, you get to this place where, it's an honor to do what we do. It really is. And I hope we're doing it for another 15 years. It's been fantastic. And again, I think we all have a slightly different personality. We all bring a slightly different, something to the table. And I think that's part of what makes it work.
Well, just take us behind the scenes. How much prep work do you do? I mean, you're on there every day talking about the news of the day, so you don't always know what your topic's going to be. It's not like when you're on once a month, you can think about it for a month and craft your stories.
Kevin, I think this is the part of the show where you're basically insinuating that I must, I just go up there and wing it, isn't it? No, it's look, I think there are days when there's more time to prepare than others. When $5 trillion of market cap reports after the bell on a particular night, there's no one that can be prepared for that. Or in the financial crisis, when news is breaking, that's once in a lifetime headlines. There's no way you can have a comment on, JP Morgan being forced to buy Bear Stearns at $2 a share. There's just no. So part of it is you learn to, again, be, live TV for all the people that are scared to death about it is actually really liberating because it's okay. It's live TV. And outside of, potty mouth, everything else, it's okay to be like, hey, look, this just happened. I don't really know what the eventual outcome is going to be, but my hunch is based upon these three things having happened before when this kind of stuff happened. Here's what I think is going to happen. That's the best thing we can do for the viewer. And I think that's really what I hope people take away from that, because again, do your work. We don't have all the answers. All those cliches, right? I mean, if I'm wrong 49% of the time, I'm doing really well. But I think the show does look. We take it seriously. Everybody is, understands the position we have to actually, be telling the story. And you want to do it with facts. I think the greatest thing to do is not be overly prepared. It's to be consistent. And markets don't change every day, even though news items do. And I don't think market setups change every day. There are momentous days, and there are some days. And I think 6 weeks ago we had Jerome Powell really forcibly and decidedly changed the tone of the Fed. I think we had a day 3 weeks ago where you had a parade of Fed governors and regional Fed governors that actually are voting members of the Fed that basically pointed out how far behind the curve they were on inflation. Those are days when I think it's okay to reassess, especially when a Fed put has been such a dominant part of an investment profile. But the best thing to not do on CNBC and on Fast Money is to go out there each night and try to say, you're never going to see this again, or this is the most important thing that's ever happened, or oh my God, buy, or sell. That is, if you ever see me doing that, start throwing rotten tomatoes at your screen, as I thought they would back in the day.
You do an amazing job. It's a voice of reason. All of you are a calming influence, even in days of high volatility. And it's that idea that markets are here for the long term, not for the trader. I've always tried to talk to financial advisors about the fact that if they can communicate with clients, I know so many wealthy, incredibly wealthy investors. And I personally, I don't know one incredibly wealthy trader. It's right. The gambler tells you about all their wins. The fishermen tell you about all their catches. But this is a long game, and you do a fantastic job of keeping us on track. And I'm grateful.
Well, Kevin, thank you. Those are kind words, and it's great to, one of the nice things about getting older is that the trophies you pick up along the way are, oh wow, I guess I've been doing this a long time, and Wall Street's actually a pretty tight community, and so it's a pleasure to be on this show, and to you're spending a lot of time trying to educate or continuing to educate or extending the education of folks that care as passionately as we do about markets. And, markets are incredibly exhilarating, frustrating, challenging, and rewarding. So thanks for your time today. And let's do this more often.
Yeah, man. Thank you for coming on. The new advisors love hearing stories, and we gave them a lot of great ones today. So
awesome.
Good luck on Fast Money today. We'll all be watching. Thank you so much.
We're dark for the Olympics, man. So I don't know when this is going to air. So
listen, you're going to have a tough time coming back with these curling fans. I mean, we're watching mixed curling here, and it's captivating.
If there wasn't ever an endorsement, look, someone should throw this conversation up on .com, because the fact that there isn't, I'm a company man, but the fact of the matter is we've been edged out for curling is absurd. And to try to make people believe that, no, you just don't understand curling. Actually, it actually should be on is also absurd, because curling should not be on. Fast Money should be on. And then if you want to put on curling later, that's fine. Although this hasn't been our greatest Olympics. NBC, you're doing a great job. Love NBC, love Peacock, go Olympics. And go American gold, man. It's been kind of a tough start.
Listen, as a man with a mustache, I'm big curling fan. I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what they're doing, but they seem like it's really important. And I agree. We could start curling at 7:00 and life would be perfect.
Yeah.
Enjoy a couple of days off.
Yeah, no, look, there's plenty to do. I'll find things to do. And, if you need me back on before we go back on air, I'm here.
We may call you up again. Go USA.
All right. Go USA. Kevin, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
This message does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to purchase securities through CWP Advisory Services. Investments are not guaranteed and involves risk of loss. The views and opinions expressed in this message are those of investment professionals made at the time this content was recorded, are not necessarily the views and opinions of CWP, and may change in time without notification. For additional information about CWP, visit CWP's or the SEC's website for a copy of our ADV disclosure brochure and Form CRS.